Welcome back. The leading voice against the government's immigration policy locked in a heated exchange with immigration officials this morning. Our Amajal Knowles has all the details in tonight's top story.
A chaotic scene at the detention center following a brief standoff between immigration officers and Rights Bahamas president and human rights attorney Fred Smith that ultimately led to the Queen's Counsel being forcibly removed from the Carmichael Road property. The incident allegedly took place shortly after 11 Monday morning when Mr. Smith came to see his client, 33-year-old Jean Charles, but was refused by the immigration department.
So I was around the gate on the inside talking to Defense Force officers and periodically asking immigration officers to let me see my client. I couldn't get any response, so I walked to the immigration administration office. The door was locked. It was a glass door. There were 6 or 7 immigration officers inside. I knocked and signaled to them that I'd like to come in to talk to the supervisor, and they all just disappeared behind a door. I waited. I knocked a few more times, and then finally the Defense Force officers told me to leave, and I told them I had a right, my client had a right to see me, and that I was insisting on speaking to the the superintendent, whoever was in charge. And instead of that, they simply, as you see from the videos, picked me up physically and ejected me from inside the gate and put me out, physically removed me.
Mr. Schmidt telling our news team that the incident such as this one only highlights what he calls the breakdown of the rule of law at the Carmichael Detention Center.
And how can, you see, I keep talking about immigration being completely out of control. So now, not only can immigration illegally arrest and detain people indefinitely, immigration are now denying people access to attorneys. Their constitutional rights are being breached in every way possible. In a general breakdown in immigration offenses or matters, immigration thinks they are a law unto themselves and are answerable to no one. They don't think the law applies to them. Constitution, Criminal Procedure Code, Magistrates Act, Penal Code, nothing applies to the immigration. It's as if they are some kind of super law above the Constitution.
The Rights Bahamas president pointing the finger at politicians both past and present, who he's accusing of helping to create this culture.
And this is a problem that we have because our politicians, like that antichrist of democracy, Fred Mitchell, continue to feed the concept that immigration are above the law and are answerable to no one. They can just do whatever they want to do without any respect for the Constitution.
Mr. Smith has been very vocal about the government's hardline immigration ultimatum that calls on all illegal immigrants of all nationalities to leave the country by December 31st, or else. The government has vowed that the apprehensions will be inhumane and within the law, however Mr. Smith has repeatedly condemned them as anything but. Now calls were made to Immigration Director William Pratt, however those calls were not returned up to news time. For JCN News, I'm Amajal Knowles.
In news from Parliament this evening, the opposition's hardline stance against the contentious Commercial Enterprises Bill picked apart in the upper chamber as a scaremongering, xenophobic, irrational, race-baiting, and tired old tactic. A mouthful from Leader of Government Business Carl Bethel, who led off debate on the proposed legislation, one that has fueled fierce backlash from some in the private sector, unions, a former prime minister, and a leading Anglican clergyman, and has gotten the thumbs down from Progressive Liberal Party's House members. The argument that $250,000 was too low a threshold for investment in the Bahamas was a main bone of contention. Furthermore, such businesses would be entitled to a specified number of work permits for senior personnel, and that if the application for those work permits was not answered after 14 days, they would be deemed approved. The government has since made amendments.
The question of why the capital requirement was set at $250,000 only is a valid question. Based on the criticisms leveled at this bill, it would seem to me the height of bottom feeding to go so far as to grant a non-Bahamian who starts a business the right to permanently reside and live in the Bahamas for the rest of his life for a mere $500,000. This bill talks about an investment of $250,000 for a work permit. That's what this bill calls for. But the present policy of several governments is to give away permanent residency for a mere $500,000.
But PLP Senator Dr. Michael Darville is still not buying it. He's convinced that the bill, even though amended, will only disenfranchise young Bahamians, professionals, and by extension, the country. In fact, he's asking that the bill be withdrawn, at least until further consultation.
The liberalization of work permits, in my view, would go against the Bahamianization policy, the investment policy, and would prove to be counterproductive to Bahamian workers. Another important point that I must note, Madam President, is the fact that the liberalization of work permits in the proposed commercial zones was never outlined in the speech from the throne as part of this administration agenda for economic reform. So my question to the side opposite, why is this such a high priority part of your legislative agenda? And you mentioned nothing about it in the speech from the throne.
Senator Darville vowed to vote against the proposed legislation in its present form. Former Progressive Liberal Party Chairman Bradley Roberts has some questions he needs Works Minister Desmond Bannister to answer following the shocking resignations of 3 of Bahamas Power and Light's top execs. Mr. Roberts accusing the minister of knowingly misleading the House and the country during his communication of the BPL audit some weeks back. At the time, Mr. Bannister thanked BPL CFO Cecile Green, lauding her as a highly valued team member, adding that BPL valued her service and was looking forward to many years of continued productivity and goodwill. In the face of that, Mr. Roberts is now convinced she and 2 others were forced out. On Friday, BPL's Chief Executive Officer Whitney Hasty confirmed the departure of Mrs. Green, along with the company's Executive Director Deepak Patnagar and Human Resources Director Marissa Mason-Smith with immediate effect. We may be in the all clear now that the Atlantic hurricane season is over and done with, but the focus on what should be done to lessen the impact of serious storms continues. JCN's Jillian Gray has the story.
2017 accounted for the 5th most active Atlantic hurricane season since records began in 1851 and the most since 2012. In its wake, there was death, damage, and destruction amounting to hundreds of billions of dollars. But there were lessons learned like how to build more disaster-resilient countries, and that's exactly what regional entities of the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Management Agency, or CDEMA, are focusing on this week during the 10th Caribbean Conference on Disaster Management. Addressing participants during the official opening this morning was Prime Minister Dr. Hubert Minnis, who stressed that as CDEMA covers highly hurricane-prone regions, the risks faced threaten already fragile economies and demand that each island nation develop sound disaster risk management systems.
We must continue to build disaster-resilient communities through partnership for resilience. Here in the Bahamas, our NEMA team has met with CDEMA coordinating units to discuss the country work program and its alignment with national goals identified in the regional CDM strategy.
The Prime Minister went on to reiterate the Bahamas' commitment to ensuring it's prepared for natural disasters.
Our priorities are mapping our vulnerable areas and community preparedness. We are building capacity in our family islands and working to bring communities to a point where they can respond as quickly as possible in the immediate aftermath of a disaster, including logistical capacity.
The Prime Minister expressed confidence that delegates will leave the conference with a better understanding of what needs to be done in the respective jurisdictions to move CDEMA's Road to Resilience plan further along. The conference takes place at the Malaya Nassau Beach Resort. It wraps up on Friday. For JCN News, I'm Jillian Gray.
In related news, the National Emergency Management Agency recently accepted a check of $36,000 from the Honorary Consul General for Italy. The money's for hurricane relief efforts. The donation is the total proceeds at the Italian booth at the International Cultural Wine and Food Festival at the Botanical Gardens in October. Captain Russell indicated that getting health services up and running on Ragged Island is an immediate need after the impact of Category 5 Hurricane Irma in September, leaving the island virtually uninhabitable. You're watching JCN News. There's more to come after this.
This segment of the news was brought to you by Alive.